Okay. Good to go.
Okay.
You need to click there.
I know.
It's okay. Oh, Aurora Reef. Hello.
Hello, Lady Colin Campbell. Oh, this is awesome. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. I feel extremely honoured and privileged. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And how is that Mickey or Aurora?
This is Aurora.
They're like two peas in a pod, really, aren't they?
They're the joys of my life. Do you have dogs or cats?
We have a cat, and she doesn't really have a particular name. Just Pussycat.
No, I had cats, but
Treasure, yes. I'm so sorry to hear about Treasure.
Thank you. So, how do you want to rock and roll with this? Let me know when you're ready to start.
We can start anytime you like.
And then start now because we're a bit early and that gives you a bit more time.
Absolutely. Right, well, I ordered, firstly, I'm an enormous fan. Your book, The Queen Mother, I love it. I've read it twice and recommended it because the abdication is such a huge subject. And so recently, of course, I've ordered your original Harry and Meghan, The Real Story. And as we all know, you've got the new book coming out, which is a second edition, if I'm right, or perhaps a little more than that.
It's a total update, yeah.
Right, which has the additional persecutors or victims. I know that the one question everybody would like me to ask is, are there going to be any bombshells in the new edition?
Well, you've read it. What do you think?
Yes, I think that this book was published in July 2020, and a lot has happened since then. Yes. And as I told you before, I think you could not have been fairer to Meghan especially and Harry in this book. I remember Philip Schofield interviewing you, and he said to you, "Oh, you're just a gossip," which I thought at the time was a flaming cheek. And having now read an awful lot of this book, I mean, he obviously didn't read any of it at all, did he?
Oh, but Philip Schofield had a huge problem where I was concerned and had always had a problem where I was concerned. Long before I even knew who Philip Schofield was, he was busy trashing me on television because, I mean, the name meant absolutely nothing to me. And when I came out of the jungle, my son told me that Philip Schofield had been trashing me on television. I said, "Who's Philip Schofield?" And then at the National Television Awards, he tried to push me over. And
That's unbelievable.
I suppose so that people would think I was drunk or some nonsense like that. When, of course, anybody who knows me knows I drink very abstemiously. But the guy, I think, was a total jerk and had it in for me because I had a very unusual upbringing and was very open and honest about it, while he was a closet queen who was busy posing as something he wasn't, and was quite determined to traduce anybody who he felt had the liberty to be honest about themselves, because it was not a liberty that he accorded himself. Well, of course, as we now all know, Queen Philip is very much reigning on the throne of ignominy.
Well, I can only deduce there must have been a level of jealousy, because when I look at your life, it would have broken a lesser person the way that the newspapers have treated you in the past. And you are a lady by name, by nature, and you have Castle Goring. And I mean, you roll up your sleeves and you will fight for Castle Goring. You fight for what's right. You don't toe the popular line if you think something is wrong. There must have been a level of jealousy from his quarter?
Well, I think an awful lot of the media, the mainstream media, you know, first of all, I think they were jealous of the fact that I had access to material that they didn't. I mean, they would have loved to have been the ones who unmasked Diana. I was the first. They'd have loved to have been the ones who unmasked Meghan. I was the first. You know, they simply didn't have my contacts or really my courage, quite frankly. Because, I mean, if they knew something, they wouldn't have been saying it. And because they also, you see, I was very fortunate because as a result of my upbringing, I have learned, and I used to say to my children, in life, you may as well be courageous as cowardly. In fact, it's better to be courageous than cowardly because all actions have foreseen and unforeseen consequences. So you may as well be brave. Because if you're a coward, you're going to have foreseen but also unforeseen consequences as well. And I have lived my life by that lesson, which of course I learned as a result of the extraordinary nature of my upbringing. But they don't care about character, many of them. And also they are riven with envy because, you know, I was born into a privileged background. I functioned at a level that they would have loved to have functioned at and were never able to. And so, yeah, they also, I think they thought that I was an ideal victim. Now, it's been my observation in the course of my life that any woman who is slight, meaning she's not overweight and she's not a 6'4" Leviathan, and if she's attractive, and if she's from a good family and regarded as well off, she is the ideal victim in the eyes of many people. And if she's ugly and fat and a bull dyke, then she's deserving of some respect. But if otherwise, and I don't, maybe this is changing now. I'm going back because remember, I'm 74 and I'm speaking about things that happened 50, 20, 10, even 5 years ago. I'm not sure all of this is absolutely applicable nowadays because women have become so potent. But in my time, women like me were regarded as ideal victims. And also, if you were regarded as good looking, and I had originally, my original reputation was quote unquote a great beauty. And
still is. You were a model.
Yeah. But I mean, so all of that meant that, you know, I was an ideal punching bag. But of course, it's turned out that I'm not an ideal punching bag. As you know, the head guy of litigation at Express newspapers said to me when they finally had to settle with me over the Diana debacle, he said, you know, Lady Colleen, you have turned out to be one of the most formidable opponents I've ever come across. He said, if everybody knew about it, nobody would take you on. I said, Justin, his name was Justin Walford. I said, don't tell me. Spread the word in Fleet Street. I said, you know, spread the word in Fleet. And I am, you know, and I'm very respectful of people's positions. And I'm respectful of people's rights. And I'm also respectful of the law. I'm very careful what I say because in my opinion, the important thing is that each of us is a soul on a trajectory through this timed life into timelessness. And it does not behoove us to sully our soul. And so that I have spiritual strengths that it's not easy for people to dislodge, let's put it that way.
Yes.
But I think we're getting off. I think we're getting off into something too.
Well, actually, no. I mean, I think you're the polar opposite of Meghan Markle, because you really are yourself. I don't want to use the term authentic, because she comes across to me as so inauthentic, and she says some of the most bizarre things. Now, there's a school of thought in the community with some people that she's some sort of a political plant to destroy the monarchy and to destroy the royal family. And she has made some bizarre statements. She was interviewed years ago by the late Larry King, where she failed to say that she disapproved of any human rights abuses or in Saudi Arabia, and then went even further to suggest that the genocide in Rwanda had created opportunities for women to get into politics. I mean, extraordinary statements. And I think that that's where that school of thought is born from. Do you think she's a master plan to bring down the monarchy, a rather unsuccessful one, but...
No, had she been a proper agent, she wouldn't have cocked things up the way she has. I think she is a cheap and vulgar opportunist who will grab at any straw to create a vision of herself that she's then going to cram down everybody's throats. I don't think it behooves people to actually give her more power than she possesses or deserves. You know, the idea that she's some operative being managed by some Blofeld in the background, I think feeds her quest for ever greater power. I don't think she has anybody managing her in the background per se. I mean, she obviously has, you know, commercial managers, etc. But she doesn't listen to what they're saying because she knows it all. She is inept. She is unsophisticated. She is arrogant. And for all her intellectual synapses going click, 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 she's ultimately somebody who's too clever by half and stupid by whole. I don't think she's a plant at all. I think she's worked everything to get. I need to get where I want to get to. I'm gonna get there. It's so wonderful.
She's a talented woman in other areas, perhaps.
Well, I think she has perfected all of the arts of feminine traditions. Let's put it that way.
Her feminine wiles.
All the feminine wiles, but I do not for a second think that she's dangerous, and she was initially potent because of the family into which she was married and the platform which they had given her. But I do not for a second think that she is a political plant and an operator. She's an operator, she's not an operative.
I agree with you entirely, actually, but I do understand where people get that idea, because I think anti-monarchists have jumped on her.
Oh, well, yes, but she doesn't really care, you know, as far as she's concerned, if the royal family was there to traduce, because she is a user, and she will use anything that is before her badly reconstructed nose to smell her way to the next enrichment. And but she is so unsophisticated, and she is also so, in my opinion, lacking in any spiritual merit whatsoever. I mean, her personality type is very much in, you know, sensation. It's all about sensation. I feel, but it's sensation. It's not emotion, and it's not spirit. It is sensation.
It's very shallow.
Very, very.
And she says incredible things about feminism, when our late Majesty was a woman who reigned. Characters such as the late Mrs. Thatcher. I mean, what's she talking about? Women's rights all of the time.
Well, she's an ignoramus, you know. She's an ignoramus who's speaking about irrelevancies that might have been true 50 or 30 years ago. But she's so anachronistic. She's totally out of date. And I mean, she really is, in my opinion, she is a cheap and vulgar hustler who has used all her attributes, some of which were severely enhanced, others of which were developed through practice, making perfect.
Rose digging.
But she is not a feminist. I mean, I'm more of a feminist than
Oh,
she.
absolutely.
And I have never said I was a feminist. And also, the whole business of feminism is now a redundancy.
Exactly.
It's like trying to topple the aristocracy. They've been toppled for years. You know, the class warfares that are supposed to be taking place in this country that bear no relationship to reality. I mean, she's not a feminist, but feminism...
That's an excellent term. I don't think she's got a grip on reality.
No, she doesn't.
I think that's a massive part of her. She doesn't seem to see the world the way a lot of other people do.
Well, people with her personality structures do not see the world with the measure that is desirable. Because you see, to them, fact and fiction, truth and lie are all putty for the sculptor to mold into something that suits them. Those of us who understand the importance of fact versus fiction and why it is inevitable that if you do not appreciate the difference, you will come a cropper. Somebody like her doesn't. It's just material to be used for her next antic, for her next grab at attention, for her next source of enrichment. And she's not understood yet that she has been failing. And the irony of all of this is, before she met Harry, she had sufficient proportion and perceptiveness to understand that she needed to have some respect for reality and to be able to maneuver and manipulate herself into a position of, well, to ascend the next rung up the ladder. She needed to have some connection to reality. She lost that when she ended up with Harry and thought, well, I'm so great and grand and important that I'm now able to call the shots. But I have seen that happen with lots of other people who have narcissistic bents and antisocial bents and Machiavellian bents to their personality. I saw it with my own mother. I mean, I wrote a book called Daughter of Narcissus with my mother as a study as a result of the recommendation of Dr. Erica Freeman, who's one of the top 4 or 5 psychoanalysts of all time. And I'm not saying psychiatrists or psychologists. And she felt it would be useful to, because in those days, narcissism wasn't the hot topic that it is now. And people of that bent, you know, function at a completely different level. And to get to where they want to get to. And especially when they will use charm, but there comes a point. I used to say to my mother, you love the raw exercise of power, but it's not going to work with me.
I can imagine. But isn't it unfortunate that, sorry to interrupt, isn't it unfortunate that someone like Meghan, with that not grip on reality as I see it, were to marry into the most famous family in the world, and I have to bring this subject up because there once upon a time was a channel called Yankee Wally, who along with millions of other people, and I do notice you mentioned journalists had spoken to you as well about certain oddities during the pregnancy of the movement of the bump, images that are on the Getty website. I mean, it's up here, down there. Do you believe Meghan was pregnant with a small bump and wore an extra padding to over-exaggerate? Do you believe it was some sort of security stab-proof vest that slipped? Or do you believe she wasn't pregnant at all? Just sort of going out. I mean, I don't know for legal reasons how you feel about this.
No, don't worry. I know my way around the law, and I know my way with the law. So don't worry about me. First of all, I do not, when I'm writing a book, I keep myself and my ego totally out of it. I do not believe in anything. I am not a preacher, and I am not proselytizing. I am dealing with facts, as simple as that. And there is no doubt that something tremendously odd and a very disturbing took place. And obviously, this is important because Meghan was a member of the royal family, ostensibly pregnant with an heir to the British throne. Now, I think I mentioned in the book that I received so much from so many. I'm not quite sure which would be an advisable word to use. So communications from the public, that ultimately I was forced to get in touch with the late Queen's, one of the late Queen's senior advisors about this. I think I touch upon that in the book, don't I?
I haven't read the entire book, but I've been skipping back and forth, but I've been following your channel from the beginning.
Okay, well, I need to adhere to what is written in the book. But there are huge ramifications for Meghan, that as a result of Meghan's conduct. And this is all Meghan's conduct that we have to speak about. And there are huge ramifications because Meghan has created the situation where something that should never have arisen at all, a subject that should never have arisen at all, has not only arisen, but has been hotly debated for years now.
Yes, it's like the elephant in the room, really, isn't it?
Yes. And the mainstream media have been terrified to address it. But they seem to think that if they don't address it, that it's going away. It's not going away.
I did read one part where you said you have a friend who's Nigerian who had said if she dressed that pregnant in such tight clothing, she'd be stoned.
Oh yes, that wasn't a friend. That was a guest at a wedding at Castle Goring. That was one of the first people who actually said anything to me, actually, if I remember correctly, if what you're referring to.
I mean, the bump was enormous.
Well,
some days and much smaller others.
I do not for 1 second think that that this was a protective device. Why would it have been a protective device? She had protection. So that is with due respect, anybody who wishes to think that needs to address the
I think
reality.
I've just been clasping at straws for some sort of logical explanation, because pregnancy and giving birth has been going on since Adam and Eve. It's not like a situation that most people are not familiar with. And I get a lot of messages, as I'm sure you do, from midwives and doctors saying there's something's not right there.
Well, Meghan, of course, as we all know, is unique, and she is great. She is not only the greatest person that God ever put on this earth, but she has unique qualities. Therefore, she was able at 8 months pregnant to get down on her haunches in very high heels with her knees tightly closed together. Now, that is a unique ability, and I use the word unique in its classical meaning that nobody else has ever or will ever be able to perform such a feat. Pregnant at 8 months, legs tightly glued to each other, down on her haunches. Well, we all know that Archie was brilliant even prenatally. I mean, let's remember his first word, according to them, was crocodile. I mean, I don't know why they didn't say it was onomatopoeia or anti-disestablishmentarianism, but they're very modest, so they chose something simple like crocodile, which any speech therapist or linguist will tell you is a physical impossibility to be a child's first word. Nevertheless, crocodile, of course, has other meanings, but we're not going to go there. Just as how they got engaged while they were roasting a chicken. But in terms of Archie, I mean, Archie had prenatal skills that Tom Daly would envy postnatally.
Yes, the kneecap photograph, which is on the Getty website. It could have been the wind.
It can't have been the wind. It can't have been the wind. It can't have been the wind, because the wind doesn't blow babies to beneath the knees.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? And I gather the Birkenhead visit is their biggest concern personally.
Well, it's covered in my book, and I am very careful what I say, and I limit myself to the facts, and I draw no personal conclusions, because I am very attached to my money and intend to remain very attached to it. Of course, if they should wish to sue me, I'll see them in a court of law. Because anything I say is true and fair, and their conduct, especially her conduct, but he also is often collusive in
it's unbelievable, actually. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's unbelievable that Harry himself would allow this mystique as a breeding ground for conspiracy theories when he has so cruelly had rumours about his own parentage and James Hewitt. Yeah. And for the record, I don't go along with that at all. When I look at Harry's face and Charles, it's the same. The nose, the eyes, the mouth. He even pulls the same expressions. But he's grown up with that. And yet he would allow Archie and Lilibet to go through this. They will for years.
Yes, of course. This is now an issue. It should not have, none of this should have arisen in the first place. And the longer this continues, is the larger the chancre grows. And I mean, you have to read my book to see what I recommended to the late Queen's senior courtier, and it was ignored, which is fair dues. I'm not an advisor. They're under no obligation to accept anything that I have to say in terms of recommendation.
If I can just interject there, it was you who suggested increasing the number of councillors of state as an elegant solution. I remember that distinctly, and then that came to pass. And I do feel that suggestion came from you, that they followed your advice there.
Well, thank you. Yes, you know, thank you. I don't want to toot my horn too much or agree too readily with you, but thank you. But in terms of this situation, it's very easily resolvable. And the fact that it has not been resolved so far is very disconcerting, because unless there is resolution, it affects the monarchy. It affects the credence that people and the credibility that people would have in the monarchy. And it is irresponsible to not clear up a situation where there is doubt as to the viability of successors to the throne. It's as simple as that. And it's very simply cleared up. And I recommend how it can be cleared up in the book. Whether it will ever be cleared up, but also I need to make the point that in a book you have the luxury of being able to enlarge upon a subject, while in an interview, and also interviews can be cut and edited, and you can end up saying something that is legally ill-advised. So I'm not, the words aren't coming out of my mouth at all. Let's put it that way. It's all there in the book. But it is, in my opinion, inexcusable that this situation has been allowed to develop and continue to the extent that it has. But if you stop and think, you know, Harry and Meghan's conduct has been extremely mischievous. I mean, the King and Catherine both have been diagnosed with cancer. Do you think Harry and Meghan could have actually said, well, actually, amid scabies, should not have said that my father, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law were the culprits? Of course, they can't say that, because he would then be able to spin around and trash them, because they have all been in bed together, and they're all cross-pollinated with the disease that they have.
He may know where the odd body is buried.
He will know where many a body is buried. And he will also be able to confirm how collusive they have been and how manipulative they have been. But, you know, so much of this should not be happening, and it is happening. And they are, in my opinion, poisonous. It's as simple as that. And there is, even if every word they had said was true, they still had no right to say it publicly. And we all know that everything they've said has been, if not a gross exaggeration, a total lie. But even if it had all been absolutely true, had they had any sense of decency or responsibility, they would have kept their mouths tightly shut and tried to deal with the issues privately. These are people who have no decency whatsoever, in my view, none. And
yes, it seems to me they both bear grudges, or even perceived slights, and they have to take revenge, and they won't let it drop.
They're spiteful. They're spiteful. She's always been spiteful. If you speak to her, people who've known her all her life, she's always been a spiteful little bitch. And I didn't say witch, I said bitch. She's also a witch. She's always been spiteful. And he wasn't spiteful, he was volatile, and he was self-pitying, but he wasn't spiteful, but he's learned his lessons well. You know, to an extent, this, I've said it repeatedly, and I think it's a fact. This is the evocation of Sophocles, Shakespeare, and Phaedo. So, you know, what we see taking place before our very eyes is a malevolent operator, as Iago was, dripping poison in Othello's air, as indeed happened with Othello. Then you have the ramifications for Desdemona, Desdemona being the British people and the British royal family. And you remember, I'm Jamaican. So to me, harmonious race relations mean far more than they do to the average white person or even black person in this country or in the United States of America. Because I'm Jamaican, and we were at the forefront of progressive race relations when I was a child in the 50s and 60s. And I have also seen how political mischief making will destroy a racially harmonious and progressive society. And I have the murders of my grandfather, my brother-in-law, my first cousin, my father shot at point-blank range and nearly killed, all to prove what happens when you have race introduced as a destructive card, even in a country that was as harmonious as Jamaica, whose national motto is out of many one people incidentally. And therefore, I take a very strong view of the mischief making that they have caused in terms of racial harmony throughout the Commonwealth. I mean, because of who I am, I go to parties, receptions, diplomatic things, and some of the high commissioners and ambassadors, they know who I am. I don't know who they are originally. They come up to me and they say, they give me information about, you know, and I can tell you, to a man and woman, they have all been backing everything I have said. They are outraged at what Meghan and Harry have done and the damage they have caused to race relations in the Commonwealth. Fortunately, it's now gone beyond that, where people are beginning to see that Meghan and Harry are malevolent and that they are unjustified in their attacks. But you know, but for people like you and me, do you think we would be at this pass? No, we wouldn't. You would still have Meghan and Harry being able to play all sorts of cards that they have no entitlement to play.
Yes, and that is a discussion that unfortunately even YouTube and other platforms have been encouraged by Harry and Meghan to try and shut down. There have been YouTubers who've been removed, such as Yankee Wally, for daring to talk openly, question motivations. Other YouTubers who are convinced that she's a political plant. I agree with you. I just think she's too shallow, too self-centered to care. I don't even think Harry and Meghan realise the half of the damage they do. They seem so self-centered.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't think they care about it. I don't think they care.
No.
So whether they realise or not, they don't care, which is worse. But sorry, go on. Don't let me interrupt your point.
I mean, I was going to ask, because you've actually known Harry and William because they used to play with your children.
Yes.
Do you think that Harry was always a bad egg as we see him now, and that the palace covered up for him very successfully? Or do you think he's become the product of being married to someone quite difficult, very difficult?
I think he's always had what people would call issues, but I don't think he was a bad egg. I think he's always had issues. I think he's always been prone to paranoia and volatility, and he's not really been very controllable. And this was one of the consolations to the royals when he got involved with Meghan, because she was able to control him. Because but I don't think he was a bad egg. I think he was somewhat disturbed. I don't know to what extent he wasn't born with issues. Let's leave it at that. Because he always was, he was a very loving child, but a very disruptive child, and a very angry child who could be quite cruel. I mean, there's an incident in the book where he drives into the shins of a colonel who came, I think he was 3 years old, on his tricycle. And at 3 years old, you already know that shins are going to be painful. So he had that streak within him from he was a little boy. But he could be very kind and warm and obliging and empathetic and compassionate and loving. So no, I don't think he was a bad egg. I think she has taken his vulnerabilities and weaknesses and twisted and turned them into, she has done with him what Iago did with Othello, who was a basically decent man. And she has turned Harry's failings into very destructive weapons, which she has used to encourage him, as they have both used pot shots against the royal family and the British nation and everybody in general to boost herself. Meghan's ambitions were very clear. She articulated them. She wanted to be bigger than Diana. She wanted to break the internet. She wanted to have the largest Instagram following. She wanted to be the most popular person on earth. Well, she's not. Had she stayed in the royal family, and had she played with a straight bat, and had she been pleasant and dutiful and decent, she would now be the most popular person on earth. But she didn't. She showed us what she's made of, and we don't like what we see. And we are the general public. She has turned herself from being one of the most popular couples on earth onto one of the most reviled human beings on earth, all in the space of 4 years. And she has done it herself.
Yes. And I mean, Harry, physically, to me, if you look at pictures of him before he met Meghan and now, he's aged, his hair has thinned horribly, he looks hunched over, gaunt, worried. He looks to me like a victim, a real victim of something.
No, he does. You're absolutely. He looks sucked dry. He's had the life force sucked out of him. Well, that's very common with the partners of narcissistic individuals. So, but she has put him in touch with his misery, and misery also loves company, and misery enjoys being miserable. I mean, I keep on saying it, and it's an extreme example, but it's worth repeating. Ted Bundy didn't commit those crimes because they were painful to him. He committed them because they gave him pleasure. What Harry has done and what Meghan has allowed Harry to do is unleash the dark side of his personality, expand it, nurture it, grow it, develop it. But we see the visible proof of it. But it doesn't alter the fact that on some level he is gaining satisfaction because she has allowed him to indulge the destructive part of his personality, which up to then had been kept in check. Now, we all have destructive parts to our personality, and it's up to each of us to starve the destructive aspects and feed the constructive aspects. She has done the absolute opposite with him, and she has also done the absolute opposite with herself, because she reached a level of arrogance and impertinence where she felt, I'm now so big and powerful, I can do exactly what I want, and everybody's going to have to suck salt.
Yeah.
And in fact, people have seen to her. She's the one who has given us the glimpse, and then not only the glimpse, the ratification of her determination to assert what she is. And she thinks because she says, well, I'm actually a sweet and loving little flower, and I just love ripping masks off people, and I love attacking people, and I love being monstrous. But I do it with a smile, and so I'm wonderful. No, people think, excuse me, no, I just saw you doing the ripping, and you're a monster. You said you're a monster, and you're a monster. You are a monster.
Yes, I could see it on the wedding when they were in the carriage. Her face, she was just exploding with disbelief, like she was ruling the world. Yeah, I'm here. I'm. If the aliens came and said, "Take me to your leader," she'd be, "I'm here." I could see that it blew her mind once she'd actually got the ring on.
Well, the mind, in fact, was already blowing from before. Once she realized that she would most likely get the ring on, she went hell for leather to show her power. You know, Gina Nelthorpe Cowan, who was her manager and who is an extremely sound and solid individual, she said, and I actually thought she was exaggerating at the time, she said, Meghan wants to rule the world. I thought, oh, that's an exaggeration. I don't think it is an exaggeration.
No, I don't think it is at all. I don't think it is at all. Right. Just to ask you a few questions about Castle Goring. Yeah. I think that with a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people do understand, but a lot of people don't, how stressful it is to own a Grade 1 listed building. The cost, the upkeep, and the fact you can't move without asking permission to do this, that, and the other. Bit of a nightmare, because a lot of people just don't understand. They think, oh, aristocracy, money, easy, life of champagne and tiaras. And it's not like that, is it?
Well, there is the life of champagne and tiaras element very occasionally. But, you know, it's like being a member of the royal family. 98% of it is hard graft that nobody knows about. And the last 2% is very glamorous and everybody knows about it. And they think that's 95% of it. Well, it's only 2%. No, it's a lot of work. It is very stressful, but, you know, it's worth it. I say, and I mean it. When I was in my 20s and 30s and late teens, actually, it was men. After the age of 43, so in my 40s and 50s, it was my children into my mid-60s. And now it's Castle Goring. It's lovely. I love Castle Goring. It's a wonderful place. As Alma Howell, who was the number 2 from English Heritage, who was in charge of the restoration of the castle, when it was all done, she said, oh, Lady Colin, you can be proud of yourself. You have saved Castle Goring for the nation. And I didn't say to her, Mrs. Howell, I didn't save it for the nation. I saved it for myself because I loved it. I didn't want to be ungracious. She was such a lovely woman. But I did save it for the nation, as well as I saved it, full stop. So whoever I saved it for. And I think that's been worthwhile. It's a wonderful place. It's magical. It really is. And it has a wonderful history, you know, Percy B. Shelley, Mary Shelley, built by Sir B. Shelley, the poet's grandfather. Mary is the one who had to sell it, sadly, you know, because Frankenstein may now be one of the most popular books and figures of all time, but in those days it didn't really make her any money.
Really?
And she had no money, and she ultimately had to sell this. And so this was sold to Sir George Peachel, who was one of Queen Victoria's equerries, and I bought it from one of his descendants. So it's really only been owned by 3 sets of people.
Oh, that's wonderful. The staircases, wonderful.
Oh, it's a total failure, I have to tell you, as a design. It was Sir George is the one who went to Italy and had the inspiration of bringing back a dome and creating a dome, which was insanity, but anyway, he did it. It's the first glass, it's the oldest and largest glass dome in a private residence in this country.
Wow.
And it was so much trouble, and it's always been trouble. And then there was the staircase, which is a failed design but somehow works. Everybody loves it, I have to say, because I had to have it reconstructed into you know, the floorboards and the treads, etc. Not the banister, balustrade, etc., but the actual staircase itself. And so it was a massive bore and very expensive, but it was done by my wonderful joiner, Rasta. That might give you a clue as to his nationality.
I've seen the documentary of Castle Goring. I've watched it more than once. In fact, I'll probably put a link in the description. And tiaras, LadyC. Of course, we had the coronation, and a lot of me and my friends on my channel, we bought tiaras. But there is a myth as well that a tiara is not a tiara unless it's all real gemstones and family heirlooms. And I did see you say on a program that one of your channels, you were going to a particular jeweller's in London to help someone choose a tiara that would become then a family heirloom. What advice would you give people if they want to do that, have a tiara in the family as an heirloom?
Well, I mean, first of all, a tiara is a tiara. You know, they're either real or they're fake. I mean, the Duke of Roxburgh's family tiara, which is a magnificent thing, it has faux emeralds in it, but real diamonds. So, you know, the fact that and a lot of Queen Alexandra's jewelry was paste. I mean,
Really?
her supposed emeralds were paste. So, you know, we don't need to be too rigid about these things. But a tiara ideally should be real. It should be, and the easiest tiaras are made with silver, and then because silver is much easier, and in the 19th century into the early 20th century, tiaras were made in silver. It's only afterwards that they started to be made in gold and platinum. My oldest tiara, which was given to me by my aunt, is made in silver. And because also it's got foil backed stones, because in those days you didn't have brilliant cut diamonds. So you had what they call minor diamonds, M-I-N-E-R, not minor, minor diamonds. And so they were foil backed, which makes it very difficult to clean because it can't get wet. So that's problematic. But I love my tiaras.
I love them. I love them as well. And finally, LadyC, I know you're not a fortune teller, but where do you think this is going to end for Harry particularly? Divorce? Will the royal family bail him out to prevent him being an embarrassment? Where is this bizarre? Or will they live out their days like the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, stuck together?
The Duke and Duchess of Windsor, who incidentally I knew slightly, and my stepmother-in-law knew very well, and a family friend, the late John Pringle, was actually he was his ADC in Nassau during the war, and John then created Round Hill in Jamaica, if you know anything about Jamaica. And and the Windsors were, whatever people want to say about, they were dignified, and they were very royal. They were not anything like Harry and Meghan. There might have been one or two parallels, but there really are only one or two parallels. And what will become of Harry and Meghan, I don't believe in predicting. And I have seen with my own parents where an extremely destructive and unhappy relationship can last a lifetime if it is in the interest of the stronger party. And the weaker party may try to bring it to an end, but usually doesn't have the gumption or the strength. So I don't believe in predicting. I think Harry will have a much easier ride with King Charles than he will with King William. And I know what I would recommend that they do, but I wouldn't, I'm not predicting anything. I leave it up to them to deal with it, and they will be left to deal with it. And so far, their technique has been give them enough rope to hang themselves with, and they will reveal the enormity of what they are, which is what has been happening. It's been a slow and arduous process, which has been discomforting, but ultimately they are exposing themselves. And the upside of that is that had the royal family not done what it's done, the race card could have been used in a way that it has now been negated. Because had they tried to shut them down 2 years ago, or 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, people would have said, oh, it's because the royal family is racist, or da da da. So to an extent, their technique has been working very well.
I should imagine, it's only my opinion, that Harry's money is running out.
Harry doesn't have any great deal of money. And people who, you will understand, but an awful lot of people who have no concept of money will think that because he has a capital value of 40 million, that he's got money. I mean, sorry, to lead a billionaire lifestyle that would require an expenditure of more than you have in capital. It's the whole, I agree that I know that they're having financial problems. And also I've said all along, these figures that they were banding around of how much money they had and how much money they were getting from Netflix, Spotify, it was all to big themselves up. And it's all rubbish.
Yes.
Thank you so
LadyC, it's been enchanting. Thank you so much again for giving me this opportunity and talking to my viewers. And we're all looking forward to the book coming out. What's the release date?
Well, I mean, as with everything else, the book is officially published on the 4th of April, but you're not able to get delivery of it until the 11th of April in one format, and the 16th of April in another format, and in certain venues. I think it's quite amazing how pre-COVID everything was very efficient, post-COVID, nothing seems to be working the way it ought to. But I suppose I would be very interested to hear what people have to say when they've read the book.
Do you expect that the mainstream legacy media might attack you?
Well, they always do. It would be very entertaining for me if they did on this occasion, because I'm very positive about them. And I point out how they have been played by Meghan and Harry. But, you know, just because I'm defending them doesn't mean that they're going to actually defend me, because, you know, they've never, they've in the past chosen to have a go at me, even when they knew that it wasn't right and they shouldn't. So do I expect leopards to change spots? Not necessarily. But do I really care? If they go too far, they'll hear from my solicitors.
I think you're going to have a lot of people in your corner and watching your back. Don't you worry about that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for this interview. And as I say, I hope everyone enjoys it.
Thank you, my dear. God bless. It's been a real pleasure and lovely meeting you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I'm curtsying right now. Okay.